Warning, incoming game over. Warning, incoming game over.
Hello everybody and welcome to Game Over Vancouver. Here I am Zach Clarke, he is Liam Higgs, BCHL color commentator among many other things. We're here after a Canucks game that I can only describe as a 1-2 punch of abysmal and dismal. That was probably the worst performance we've seen all season long. From just about everybody. There was a couple individual players that had shifts that were good. But I'm really grasping at straws here, Liam. What was your thought of the overall game?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of put it perfectly. Abysmal. It was a really rough one for the Canucks, especially considering we averaged 28 shots on goal, and going into the second period, we only had 5. I think that was we were talking throughout the whole game. I think that was our biggest complaint. Like, we got to shoot the puck. And I counted so many times where we actually looked like we were about to create something dangerous, and we would completely sky the puck. So many missed opportunities, missing the net, just couldn't force Varlamov to make a save. I thought he looked actually pretty decent, especially down the stretch when the Canucks had a little bit of a second wind in the third period kind of a second wind, I'll say. I mean, they didn't really do much.
They didn't have a first wind.
Yeah, they have a first win, right? But Myers got a goal. There you go. The Chaos Giraffe is able to bag one. Yeah, there you go. Myers gets one. But yeah, just a really tough game. I mean, I have a lot of notes here. I'd say 95% of them are just bad things, just negative all around. I would say puck watching a lot too. There was a couple of goals where it just felt like the Canucks were standing around. No one was taking sticks in the slot. Just a really rough game.
Yep, 5-2 was the final score. And before we get any further, I will remind you guys that we, of course, have many wonderful sponsors and affiliates here at Game Over Vancouver. And, of course, check out the flagship show of the Game Over Vancouver network on the Game Over Network channel, Hyperdrive Hockey, all things hockey across every league in multiple countries, whatever it is and wherever it is. Max, Daphne, and Kev have you covered for all your hockey news with a steady dose of fun fan engagement. You can find Hyperdrive Hockey on the Game Over Network YouTube channel or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts on the Hyperdrive Hockey page at thegameovernetwork.com. So check out Hyperdrive Hockey. They certainly do a better job of what they do than the Canucks did tonight. Yeah, giving my overall thoughts of the game, honestly, it was really tough to try to find anything positive. A couple good comments already in chat. Mark Sianquita, fellow Game Over host, saying, "Hey, that's more punches than the Desharnais fight." Great comment. That's hilarious because it's also true. I also enjoyed right after that where they both just basically stripped down to nothing in the penalty box. I don't know if you guys saw that on the broadcast, but both him and Matt Martin just taking off all their gear in the box. I guess if you're going to sit for 5, you want to be comfortable, but that was funny.
Yeah, I guess getting, maybe got a little warm in there.
Yeah, you build up heat with that short of a fight. And then one more thing. Yeah, Lekkerimäki's first goal. I mean, that was probably honestly, if I'm real, the only major positive to take away from tonight is that Lekkerimäki, the kind of rookie that really, I wanted to see a goal from him, and I wanted to see one quickly. Now, you can argue, and I think you would be successful in arguing, that Varlamov probably should have had that, probably wants that one back. A good shot, not to take that away from Lekkerimäki, but he had time to get over. So, nice to see the rookie getting his first goal. I think that you can absolutely justify keeping him in the lineup. I don't think that he played poorly enough to warrant, an immediate send down to the AHL. But I think that there was a bunch of other players on the team that you could argue should be sent to the AHL after those performances.
Yeah, it was pretty rough. I will say it was really nice to see Lekkerimäki be selfish, I'll say, on that attempt. Like, he didn't catch the puck and go in deep and like try and stick handle or do too much. He just got rid of the puck immediately. So that was really nice to see from Lekkerimäki taking away the positive. And especially considering, again, going into the second period, I believe he had half of our offense in terms of shots on goal. He had like 2 of our 5 shots heading into the second period. So that was good to see. He was driving a lot of offense in this game. I thought Dakota Joshua, he had a rough penalty. I believe it was in the third period. Obviously, he had to sit for 2. But other than the penalty, I thought he had a really good game as well, especially with Ratu. I think those two together looked nice. And I think that's basically it for the positives in this one. I thought Dakota Joshua looked good with Ratu, and Lekkerimäki was nice to see be a little bit selfish on that shot on goal.
Yeah, I think it was one of those things where the Islanders came in with a game plan and the Canucks failed to adapt to it at any point in the game. It looked like at the very start of the third period, they might have found something, and even that tapered off into nothing. I mean, they played the trap very effectively, props to the Islanders because they came in with a game plan and they stuck to it through 60 minutes, and the Canucks at no point played their style of hockey. This was them trying to play the Islanders style of hockey and failing miserably because that's just not what the Canucks are built for.
Yeah, and I think you saw. I mean, we talked about going into the game how we thought might be a little bit of a boring one with just how
It's the
how
Islanders.
it's the Islanders, that 1-3-1 trap. But boy, did the Canucks had struggles all throughout the game, getting through the neutral zone in their own end. Like I said, they were caught puck watching a lot. I was really impressed with the amount of offense that the Islanders were able to generate, considering that they're about middle of the pack and most important stats in terms of offense. I think they get about 30 shots on goal, and they had 24 going into the third. So that was really nice for them to see. Which I'll say again, the Canucks, the home ice struggles I don't know what it is at this point. This team plays so well away, and then they come home, and it's like a completely different hockey team. And I don't know why. It should, by all metrics, at the very least, be the opposite. So I don't know why on home ice we struggle. It's one of those games where like everything went wrong. It wasn't just a few things, like basically everything went wrong. It's one of those outliers where it's a tough one.
Yeah. Addressing a couple comments from the chat. So typically Canucks playing down to the opponents. I agree entirely. I mean, the Islanders are a team that on paper you have to be beating. They're a team that's barely, going to fight for a wild card spot, while we are considered a lock in the Western Conference. At the very least, even if you're not beating those teams, because sometimes you lose games to inferior opponents, that happens. It's hockey. You got to at least have it be a close game and not have 7 shots after 2 periods. And by the way, one of those shots was credited in the third. They had to go and find it back in the replay.
And one of those shots, I think we had like 3 shots going in the second period. One of those shots came from our own blue line.
2 of them. Courtesy of
those
the stats. 2 of the shots that we had, 2 of the 6 shots we had were from in our own end. So effectively 4 shots on goal. 1 shot every 10 minutes that actually had any chance of going in. I mean, there's no other way to say that. Even if you're scoring on all those shots, your opponents might beat you. I mean, it's just tragic. I agree with you, Mark. Sianquita rightfully pointing out low-key bad game from Quinn Hughes. I had that on one of my notes. One of the goals against where Quinn Hughes, he tries, I believe it was the second one, where Quinn Hughes tries to make a bank pass off the boards without looking where his teammate was, and it gets picked off. I just thought it was very uncharacteristic game of Quinn Hughes, because usually his passes are crisp, tape to tape, and he's also a one-man possession machine. Tonight, it kind of looked like he was a little uncertain when he had the puck with himself, and the passes were just, shocking from a player of Quinn Hughes' caliber. By no means was he the worst Canuck on the ice, but I think comparatively to expectations, what we expect from him, he might have had one of the furthest from expectations games.
Yeah, in terms of like, if you want to talk about it like that, or in terms of expectations, yeah, he had a rough night. It's a lot of turnovers, and I think it might be a little bit of a case where the Canucks just couldn't get anything going. So maybe he plays a little bit of hero ball. He wants to try and do it all. He peppered the net in that third period. He was trying to shoot the puck. So it might be just a little bit of a case if he was just trying to do everything for this hockey team and got himself into some bad spots. I thought the Islanders were really good. They had really good hustle tonight. They were all over the Canucks in terms of getting after them on the forecheck. There was no space out there for the Canucks like there usually is, especially in the offensive zone. I thought the forecheck for the Islanders looked great. They were all over the front of the net. They did a great job crashing the net. I think their first 3 or 4 goals, 2 for sure, were all from just one of those plays where they throw the puck towards net and bang away at it and it goes in the back of the net. So they did a great job crashing the net. And like I said, just kind of being that suffocating Islanders presence that you're used to seeing with them in terms of defensively.
Yeah, and I thought vice versa. The Canucks, who are, under Tocchet especially, are supposed to be a really strong defensive team, were just awful. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't want to harp on it, but I seriously, there was not a single good defensive player tonight. There was a couple okay offensive.
And who I thought looked really bad, which was, I mean, he's had some rough games this season, but Hronek. I mean, there was that one goal, I believe it was the 4th goal, where he's doing nothing he's in the blue paint. He's sitting in front of Lankinen to pass out front. I believe it was the 4th goal. And it's just, there was some really, it was some really bad performances from the Canucks all around. And that's why it's one of those games where it was so bad where it's kind of an outlier where it was just it was all around just rough hockey.
Yeah, because here's the thing. Before this game, easily the worst performance of the season was the loss to the Devils where we got blown out. But at the very least with that loss, you can say, okay, the Devils are an elite team that is considered by many to be a Stanley Cup contender. This was the Islanders. Everyone knows what the Islanders are. They might squeak into a playoff spot to get eliminated in the first round, and that's pretty much the best case scenario unless Sorokin stands on his head. And even then, let's be real, they're not even close to a contender. So at least with the Devils, you had that to fall back on of, okay, we had a bad game against a contender, they're going to punish you. But we can't have games like this. I mean, especially defensively. Yeah, Horvat was abysmal. That play on the fourth goal genuinely looked like peewee hockey. I don't even know what he was trying to do. Like, at least on some plays where players make a mistake, you can be like, okay, he made a mistake, but I know what he was trying to do. Seriously, what was he even trying to do on that play? He's facing the wrong way, kneeling,
he's definitely trying to break
his
up
own goaltender.
I'll play a little bit of defense because obviously he's still I'll play the devil advocate here because he's still an NHLer. He's trying to block the pass, but he's completely not in the passing lane. That's what
I'm saying. He's facing the wrong way, not in the passing lane. I mean, that's especially as an NHLer, I just don't understand how you can. Well, I mean, everyone makes mistakes, but that's an egregious one, and especially when it comes after not a great performance all night long. But honestly, I didn't think he was the worst one defensively tonight. JT Miller, who last year in the playoffs was probably the second best defensive center in the entire Stanley Cup playoffs behind Alexander Markov, had an abysmal defensive game tonight. I mean, he let them do anything that they wanted all night long. It was just, you want a passing lane? Yeah, go for it. Of course you can have a passing lane. You want to blow right by me? That's fine. That's all right. Whether, again, I think that, especially because JT Miller, I mean, peak mountaintops and valleys, I guess, describes his game over the last 2 years, was hated so badly 2 years ago that people were saying to trade him for nothing. And then last year was revered as one of the best players in the entire league. Now it almost feels like it's gone back again. Because seriously, what was that game tonight? I mean, very little offense, but it was the defense that felt like the JT Miller of 2 years ago.
Yeah, and like I said, it was kind of like everyone was like that. I think everyone had one of their worst performances tonight. Vincent Desharnais, another name that comes up when you want to talk about defensemen having a rough night. Myers gets a goal, and I still think he had a couple of bad plays in there. And like I said, it's just one of those nights where it wasn't the Canucks, and the Islanders took full advantage of it. Their trap was dominant, and they did a really good job. I think one of the biggest areas for the Canucks to try and get momentum throughout the game was to get on the power play, and the Islanders did such a good job, especially with how aggressive they were being in terms of chasing after the puck. You think being that aggressive, they're going to get their stick into some places where they're going to get into some trouble with penalties. They didn't. I think they took one penalty all day long. Great job by them, because that was where I thought the Canucks are going to be able to get some momentum. It's a decent power play this year against the second worst penalty kill in all of hockey. And how do you avoid that situation? Just stay off of the penalty kill. And they did that successfully. And even the one power play they did give up, it was a fine kill. I think the Canucks generated like 2 shots on goal in it, and it amounted to nothing. So a really good job again by the Islanders taking advantage of a rough game, and especially with no Barzal in the lineup. I thought that was really good as well. I thought Bo Horvat had a great game. Bo Horvat gets 3 assists tonight against the Canucks, which definitely stings a little bit. Obviously, Bo coming back to town with a little bit of a revenge game. It was nice to see it. Speaking of revenge games, like I said before, Ratu played good. But just to get back to the Islanders, one of the big things I also liked from them, the faceoffs. They dominated in the faceoff circle. Speaking of Bo Horvat, 63% in the dot. And you talked about it earlier about the Canucks being a possession-based team. Well, they never had possession of the puck, especially off of the faceoffs. They had to go constantly win it back from them. So just a really solid performance from the Islanders. And especially, I mean, it comes at a time when the Canucks have a bad performance. And there you go. That's the math. You have a dominating performance by the Islanders.
No, absolutely. And I think that, interestingly enough, the thing that, if I had to pinpoint, I mean, there you could pinpoint anything, but if I had to pinpoint the one thing that I thought was the worst for the Canucks tonight was the breakout, especially in the first 40 minutes. The reason they had no shots is they're taking 2 minutes to get the puck out of their own end. By the time they finally accomplish what should be a relatively simple feat, they're at the end of a shift, and they need you to just dump the puck in and go to the bench. We saw that maybe like 7 or 8 times in a row in the first and second period. I genuinely felt like I was bashing my head into a wall watching that game, because it just felt like the same thing on repeat. Islanders control play for 2 minutes. Canucks finally get the puck back, but again, too tired to do anything. Dump it in and change plays. And I mean, you're just not going to score with that few shots on net, and you're not going to get any shots on net if you're just dumping it in, and you have to dump it in if you can't get the puck out of your own end. So the breakout was really bad. But what concerns me with that is that, theoretically, the defensemen that we have in currently should give us our best chance of breaking out. Hughes, Brandstrom, Hronek, all of them are touted as really good puck movers. And tonight, there was absolutely none of it. I understand the Islanders were playing the trap, but the thing is with the trap is, at the very least, it's in the neutral zone. The Canucks could not even get to the neutral zone. They were hemmed in their own end so badly. And what's worrying about that is that, as you mentioned, Islanders didn't even have Barzal. This was a below-average Islanders squad that they faced. and they made a mockery of the Canucks. I mean, I would love to know exactly how long the puck was within the Canucks' own end in the first 40 minutes, because it felt like forever.
I'd like to be on a fly on the wall in the dressing room and listening to Rick talk it after this one because, like I said, no Barzell. It's extremely tough. One of the things I'll say too, the Islanders did a great job of winning puck battles. You mentioned how they couldn't get out of their own zone. Well, a lot of that came from some weak efforts up the strong side or even the weak side. They just couldn't break it out. And then when they did break it out on the dump and chase, they never won the puck back on the dump and chase. Really good game, like I said, by the Islanders. Maybe not a really good game, but it looked like a really good game, which is how bad the Canucks were. And if you're an Islanders fan, Canucks, like you said, one of the top teams in the Pacific right now. It gives you a little bit of hope for your Islanders team going forward. Because, like you said, the fringe playoff team with the Islanders, and to do it with Varlamov in net as well. Coming off of a 2-game loss streak with Sorokin, you go back to Varlamov and he's able to get you a win. It's really nice for the Islanders. And like you said, I'm really racking my brain here to find something positive to say with the Canucks because it just wasn't there.
Yeah, I mean, Lekkerimäki, again, we've already talked about him, so it's hard to go back to him as a positive, but he, at the very least,
he had a good game.
Yeah, he looked like an NHLer already, which is incredible as a super young rookie. He's not even 20 yet. He's in his teens and he's playing for the Canucks.
Yeah, and I'll give you some credit. You're right about that one. I'll give you some credit. You were right about how he was going to make an immediate impact, and I thought he did. Because in terms of, we talked about JT Miller not driving the offense like usual. Quinn Hughes definitely wasn't driving the offense like we're used to seeing him drive the offense. But Lekkerimäki, actually, he was able to get some offense. He got some shots on goals. He had that one where he fanned on the slap shot from JT Miller. I thought that was going to go in the back of the net. But yeah, he was actually able to get some offense going and lay the body as well. I think he had a hit or two in this game as well. So it was nice. It was nice to see that from him.
Yeah, he played with real confidence, which I really am glad that the Canucks decided to play him for several months in the AHL as opposed to trying to bring him up. I remember there was rumblings last year about, the Canucks should bring him up for the playoffs.
Can I say I was really happy with the deployment too. The opportunity he got. I mean, he's getting first line. He was getting first line time. I think he was also on the second line power play, but first line time with JT Miller. I was really liking the deployment and seeing the trust that Talk had already had in him.
Yeah, well, a player with Lekkerimäki's archetype, you just can't deploy unless you're going to give him those chances. He's so offensively gifted, and that's where his strong suit lies, that he would be wasted on the third or fourth line, especially if you want him to grow and become a everyday NHLer, especially an offensive threat and everyday NHLer. You can't have him in that bottom six. So it is a bit of a risk from the Canucks to bring him up, especially this early in the season. But that shows the kind of faith they have in the kid, and I thought that he absolutely lived up to expectations. I really hope that he stays for at least a week or two, or maybe even 3. Maybe for the rest of the season if he can continue to play this way. But at the very least, I want them to give him an extended look. I don't want this to just be a 1 or 2 or 3 game look. I think that the way that he's played in Abbotsford has really shown that he's earned a look at this level. And yeah, he played well tonight. Garland playing well as well. Although, honestly, I thought he played well, but I didn't think he played as well as he has been. I think everyone, but the thing is that's also a product of your team playing poorly. How well can you as an individual do if your line mates are just awful?
I'll say for him, he had another one of those things where it's just like the puck luck. This is a perfect moment. You can tell this just wasn't going for the Canucks. I can't remember who passed. I think it was Pettersson, but a perfect setup. I believe it was on the power play, or it might have been even strength, but right in front of that wide open net for Connor Garland, and it goes off his skate, which could have been an easy tap in for him. So it was just like I said, there's just something was off tonight, and yeah, that's a perfect example of, like you said, Connor Garland had a decent game. I think my line of the game, I should say, I think the best bright spot for the Canucks was Antu Ratu and Niels Hoglander and the Dakota Joshua line. They were, I thought, the best bright spot for me. They were really pushing play. I think they had like 13 hits combined as a line. They were really that energy line for us, and they showed that. A little bit sad to see that some of the offense didn't work. I will say Dakota Joshua had a really nice setup. I believe it was in the third period, but yeah, that line was a real big bright spot for me for Vancouver.
Yeah. Seeing some more comments about Pettersson in the chat. Honestly, it's not just Pettersson. The thing is with the Canucks is, like, when you have 3 superstar caliber players in Quinn Hughes, Elias Pettersson, and JT Miller, you have to at least get superstar performances from 1 per night. When you've got 3 players that can play at that caliber, 2 can have off games, but if all 3 have off games, you get games like tonight, because all 3 of them did not play well. Honestly, of all 3, I thought Pettersson looked the best, and he still didn't look great.
Yeah, and I think that's saying something because obviously that's kind of been a theme all season long. When is Petty going to get going? And it wasn't tonight, but he still somehow wasn't the worst on the ice for the Canucks. He had 6 shots on goal, which is the most on the team. I mean, he was 50 or sorry, he was 4 for 10 in the faceoff dot, 40%, which is about in the middle of the pack of the team. It's not very good, but he had 2 hits in this game. He had a block. I mean, in terms of the stats of what you're looking at, he wasn't the worst, which I think is saying something more about the rest of the team because it still, like you said, wasn't a good performance from him either.
Yeah, I mean, Pettersson does continue to take steps, but as we've said before on this show, that's not enough. When you're making $11.6 million, you've proven you've already taken many, many steps, and you should be at the top of the mountain and basking in the glory of being one of the best hockey players in the world. And this year, he just hasn't been. He has been, as I've put it a few times, anyone. He's been any middle six forward. He hasn't been so bad that you can say take him out of the lineup, but he also hasn't been so good to justify anywhere near what he's making. I mean, night in, night out. Has there been one game this year where he has outplayed Connor Garland? Probably not. Maybe one. And the fact that we're saying that is horrifying because most people considered Garland overpaid at $5 million. So that really shows what Pettersson's been like at 11.6.
Yeah, and I'll say this. I mean, he's coming off of 2 goals. Obviously, he had a goal in Edmonton and a goal in Calgary. But yeah, it was really bad tonight. I'm just reading some of the chat. It's good to see Kai say Talkett started his media availability by apologizing to
really
the fans.
funny.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it kind of was just that night. It was one of those nights where just nothing was going right, and everything. I wouldn't say everything was going right for the Islanders, but a lot was going right for them. As some things that I saw from them wasn't things I was expecting. Like I said, the offense actually moved the puck around really well. It wasn't as many greasy goals or just Islander style goals, if you will, as I thought. Just a really rough night all around for the Canucks. I think that's a perfect way to put it, is seeing Talkett immediately apologize to the fans.
Well,
so that just shows you the kind of night it was.
It was like I think I said when we were talking halfway through this game that I guarantee there were some members in that audience, in the crowd tonight, that had saved up their money off just a little bit off their paychecks for weeks, months on end, so that they can go with their friends and family to a Canucks game, and that's what they saw. I mean, that's just a performance that a cup contender just can't really have. There's kind of like a floor that a cup contender should be able to hit. I'm not saying that the Canucks can't lose to the Islanders. Of course not. Every Stanley Cup contender. I mean, how many losses did the Florida Panthers have last season? Many. I'm not saying you can't lose games, but I am saying that if you want to seriously be taken serious as a contender in the West, you can't look that bad because games like that in the playoffs, you will be slaughtered. You will be decimated. You will be destroyed systematically by any team that makes the playoffs is going to be good enough. I mean, again, we talk about the Islanders as kind of the very bottom caliber of what we consider a playoff team, and they destroyed us tonight. And so just you can't have performances like that come through.
And it's weird. It's only been on home ice because on away ice we're like well above 500. I believe we're like 7-2-2 or something like that. But like we're negative now with that loss tonight on home ice, including obviously we've lost twice in overtime on home ice as well. So I don't know what it's been about playing at Rogers Arena, but the Canucks just haven't been performing on home ice. And especially when I talk about how if you think about it on paper, it should be the other way around. Like if they're not performing away, then it's like at least the fans are getting a good show where, now they're giving you a good show when you watch here at home on your TV. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to go watch a game, save up my paycheck. And then, they have a bad one all the time. It feels like on home ice.
Yeah, Santa, a couple more good comments. Also, when Ovi hit that bottom shelf sinker, that's fair enough. Ovi has been a fun story to watch. Just to step away from the Canucks for a brief moment. He's definitely.
There's not much more to say.
Record. Yeah, he's definitely going to get that goal record. One thing I will say that someone else pointed out is Cap's play-by-play announcer so electric when Ovi scores because the way he says scores off those one-timers just great. He makes those boring goals that Ovi has scored on 250,000 times in his career seem exciting every time. I'm not sure if I can shake this off. We know the trouble when we start losing and we're never performing to our strengths. Honestly, I understand the doom and gloom. Now, I will say the Canucks record is still totally fine. We're still among one of the best teams in the West by points percentage. which is kind of sad. That says more about the Western Conference than it does about the Canucks, if I'm honest. What you say at the end of that comment is what I really agree with and what I'm really scared about for the Canucks. Never playing to our strengths. So true. The Canucks have, and I mentioned this earlier, they were playing the Islanders game for 60 minutes tonight. What happened to this Rick Tocchet defensive style of hockey where every forward is getting really involved defensively? They're capitalizing. Well, they weren't that capitalizing on the rush last year, but they were able to set up in the offensive zone, cycle the puck around, and get legitimate chances by having more skill than the opponents. The top lines of the Canucks, again, on paper, should be unreal. There's so much talent on this team. And that's what makes these losses so frustrating, is how can you have arguably the best defenseman in the game, last year arguably one of the best defensive centers in the game in JT Miller, and one of the best young superstars in the game in Elias Pettersson be this bad? I'm sorry, fairly consistently. Pettersson hasn't been great this season. JT Miller hasn't been great this season. Quinn Hughes has. He had a bad night. I'll let him off because he's been great pretty much every other game. But it is a little bit worrying, and it is starting to get to the point where you do kind of wonder what the Canucks can do to get some consistency, because I think undeniably we have seen great performances from them this year. We know they can still be a legitimate playoff team, but you have to find some semblance of consistency. You will not win a 7-game playoff series if 3 of the games you play the worst hockey that this team's ever seen.
Yeah, I think consistency is the big word that you mentioned there, is just finding that consistency. I will say this, it's really concerning not having, you mentioned Miller, you mentioned obviously Quinn Hughes as a defenseman is a little bit different, but Pettersson's guy like that, not even being in the top 25 for NHL point leaders is, yeah, it's a little bit concerning. But I will say, I still think the Canucks are a legitimate playoff team. I'm not panicking too much. It's still pretty early into the season. But yeah, and again, I wouldn't look too much into this game just because I think it was so bad that it's just a little bit about an outlier. Literally nothing went right. Even the puck luck went the other way. It was a really rough night for Vancouver.
Yeah. I mean, that is really... I think, honestly, the game can best be summarized by the Islanders' second goal, where a shot from the blue line takes a deflection off not one, but 2 Canuck players before ending up in the back of the net. No Islanders screening, no Islanders in deflection. It's all the Canucks scoring on themselves.
I felt bad for Lankinen too, because I thought he actually had a decent game. He made some really big saves, especially in the first period. But yeah, that goal was tough. And I saw it all night long. The Canucks getting into shooting lanes, but then not blocking the shot. It felt like that happened 4 or 5, maybe even 6 times in that game.
Yeah. And honestly, saying go off Zach ranting, but how can I not? You know what? I'm going to pull up a stat here that's going to blow your mind. Are you ready for this? Stefan Nason has more goals than Pettersson does points. Stefan Nason! He was in the AHL 3 years ago. Pettersson's been a superstar for 3 years. I mean, it's not just Pettersson. I'm using it as an example because the numbers fit my criteria for that example, but it's not just him. JT Miller hasn't been there either. And it's just, at a certain point, you need your superstars to start going before the rest of the team can be around you. I understand the complementary cast of characters should be able to play good hockey without your superstars. Proof is in the pudding with the likes of Connor Garland, who's playing well even without superstar line mates. But at the end of the day, if your superstars are not performing, this team cannot perform. Even if everyone else is performing. If Pettersson and Miller are not performing, this team cannot go anywhere.
And I'll say the one superstar that is obviously clicking is Quinn Hughes, but he can only do so much. I mean, we've seen it with the Edmonton Oilers with Connor McDavid and Draisaitl for almost a decade now, that you need more than just 1 or 2 guys firing at one time. And right now it just feels like the Canucks, it's one line going at a time, and then it's this guy going and then this guy's not going. It's that consistently. I think it's the consistency, I should say, is the biggest thing for Vancouver. But yeah. And I think you saw it tonight, especially with how they were moving through the neutral zone and trying to get out of the zone. When Quinn Hughes is not on the ice, this team cannot get out of their own end, it feels like. Unless if they have Quinn Hughes on the ice to make a nice breakout pass, if this team cannot get out of their own zone with possession, it feels like Quinn Hughes has to do it every time. And then when he has a bad game, like he did tonight, you see what happens.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And honestly, I think that is why you cannot make any case for taking Erik Brannstrom out of the lineup. Now, did he have a great game tonight? No, I didn't think he had a great game. Didn't think he was one of the worst, but I didn't think he was great. But with the actual just detriment of puck movement from the Canucks back end, especially outside of the Hughes-Hronek pairing, most of which is Quinn Hughes. But outside of that top pairing, there is no one that can move the puck well. Myers and Soucy, don't get wrong, they have strengths. Puck moving's not one of them. Juleson, Desharnais,
I will say, and I think you'd agree with me, Brandstrom, I think, is your best guy for that. He's actually had some,
that's my point.
decent offense. Yeah, I think he deserves to be in that bottom six for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I don't think he's done anywhere near as badly defensively as I think some people have said that he has. I think he has been great, no, but I think he hasn't been worse than anyone else in our bottom four. In fact, I'd argue he might be as good, if not better defensively, than Soucy and Myers have been this season. Soucy underratedly has been very poor this season, and I do think he'll turn it around. I don't know. Right now, it's hard to find why the Canucks are struggling. You know what I mean? It's not like they have any major changes. Soucy Myers last year was an amazing pair. Same coach, same strategy, same pairing, and now they're abysmal. I just don't know. I don't know what's happened to a lot of this team. At this point last year, Quinn Hughes, JT Miller, and Elias Pettersson were all fighting for the number 1 points in the NHL. This year, I mean, they're all nowhere to be found with the possible exception of Quinn Hughes. I mean, defenseman, so you can expect a little less points from him. But still, I don't know. It's just been a little bad. Why don't we take...
I'll say this. Against contenders in the last 15 game stretch or whatever, we've lost every single game. If you consider we beat the Kings, which I guess as a Kings fan, you threw me under the bus last time, I'll say the Kings are a fringe playoff team at best right now. So I'm not going to count them, but real contenders, we lose to Edmonton, we lose to the Devils, we lose to Carolina, we lose to the Lightning. We did beat Florida, which was good to see, but it's really a struggle to see when you talk about being a contender finally, not being just a team that's going to be, out in the first round, out in the second round, being a real contender. When we play a contender, we just don't show up. And in fact, you look at the Edmonton game, giving up 7 goals. It's sometimes we get blown out of the water by those teams, which is really, it's concerning.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think the Canucks, the Florida game was a great example of what the Canucks can be because Florida didn't play badly that game. I will say they were down some pretty big names. So it wasn't a full-strength Florida team, but it was still a mostly full-strength Florida team, and the Canucks played very well in that game. And that's why games like this are so frustrating, is because we have now gotten the expectations set that this is a playoff team, and that this team can contend with anyone. And so it's just, performances like tonight are really disheartening, because again, I can handle losses. I've seen many a loss in my time, but it's just a loss where you are handily destroyed and dismantled systematically by another team that should be worse. And again, there's just nothing to fall back on. You can't even point to a 5-minute stretch where you're like, oh, the Canucks were better than this team. No, the Islanders were better for all 60 minutes.
The first 2 minutes, the Canucks had not even the first minute and a half, or whenever Lekkerimäki scored, that was the best part of the game for the Canucks. So there you go.
Yeah,
that's about it.
I mean, Kevin Lankinen played pretty well. I didn't think he played great. I think that Kevin Lankinen has now kind of shown what he is, which is a goaltender that is a fringe starter. A backup goaltender that's a high-quality backup or a low-quality starter, and I'm very happy with that. I think that Lankinen has been a steal for the Canucks, and I think that in no way can you point this loss on Lankinen, even if 1 or 2 of those goals you might want, Demko might have saved. Okay, even if Demko saves 2 of those goals, we still lose. So
yeah, I think it's a case. I saw a comment earlier in here that it's the case of it doesn't matter how good the goaltending is. If you don't score, you're not going to win the game. I mean, you score 1 goal against, like you said, a team on everything on paper is in your favor. It's home ice
without Barzal too.
Yeah, without Barzal as well. So it's really it's really concerning. But I'll say this to Lankinen, I thought, like you said, he had a really good game. I'm really happy with him. Obviously, I thought the Canucks got a really good steal. I will say Sheloff's has been a little bit disappointing, but you can't expect Lankinen to play like Demko or whatever, like a .938 goaltender every single game.
No, you just can't. It's not feasible or realistic to expect of your backup. So I think we've done enough ranting about the overall state of the game. Shall we move on to period 2 now?
Yeah. I think we're good. Not much.
Before I get heated up again.
There hasn't been much to say. Like I said, it literally all went wrong. What can you say?
Everything went wrong. The wheels fell off, the brakes failed, the pedal was glued to the metal. Yeah. All right. Well, Moving on
It was definitely not pedal to the metal for the Canucks tonight. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, pedal to the metal straight into a brick
Yeah.
wall 5 minutes in. That's about how.
Yeah, and even you talked about Soucy and Myers. That defensive pairing again had a rough one tonight. You think about the goal that Myers, I believe, was in the first period, on the power play, the first goal of the game. It's like the same as Hronek. He's in the passing lane, but it's like he's not really in the passing lane. The pass goes right through him, backdoor tap in. Like it's it's tough.
Okay, so we'll move on to period 2 now, and in this period we will talk about what we might want to see from the Canucks in the future. But before we get there, do want to say that Game Over Network is an independent production, of course. No big company behind us. It's all just us, ourselves, and I is plural. And we are focused on community, inclusion, and quality people. If you're interested in supporting the Game Over Network more than just a like or subscribe, which we do, of course, really appreciate, we have crowdfunding options available. In the description of this episode down below, you will find a link to our Patreon page. And we're also working on a page through LaRouche, which is a crowdfunding platform for companies originating in Quebec, similar to Kickstarter, but again, just for companies that are based in Quebec like us. For LaRouche, we're aiming to raise $15,000 throughout the course of the season, and if we hit that goal, we'll actually gain access to government grants through the Canadian government that will allow us to do a lot more, including employing more people, add more content, and just in general have a better and higher quality production. So consider supporting us through that, and as well, if we hit certain goals through crowdfunding, we will be doing different rewards and tiers like that. So if you guys have any ideas for rewards you'd like to see, you can join our Discord server and let us know, or just leave a comment on the stream. And we'll see that and consider it for that. So moving on to period 2 now, things we'd like to see in the future. Number one is, honestly, I want to see the Canucks potentially taking a look at different defensive pairings. We have not really seen any experimentation outside of the bottom pairing. The bottom pairing has been very experimented with. We've seen Juleson, we've seen Horvat, we've seen Desharnais, we've seen Brandstrom, we might see Mark Friedman at some point. But the other two pairings have not been shifted around at all. Now, I know Hughes and Hronek is, the bread and butter of the Canucks defense. It has been going really well, so maybe you do want to continue leaving that one alone. But Soucy Myers has been dreadful through 16, 17 games, whatever we're at now. They have not one time showed what they showed in the playoffs. In the playoffs, there were these huge bodies suffocating one-on-one where you just can't get around them. They felt like brick walls. Now it feels like those walls have come tumbling down and people are stepping over the pile of bricks and walking in. There's no offense being generated from that line, which isn't what they're expected to do, but they are expected to be a shutdown defensive pairing. So, if the one thing they are not doing has not been done through the entirety of the season thus far, why are we still trying to do it? Shake it up! Let's try other combinations, because right now there's no puck movement on that pairing. Maybe you could try something. I don't really know. I do think the biggest solution to the Canucks' defensive woes right now is to bring in another defenseman. I was
just saying, who else do you try that you think is immediately going to make this better?
No, I mean, you're right. There's very little to do. I mean, because in theory, if you want to add puck moving to that pairing, well, the one puck moving defenseman you have outside of Hughes and Hronek is Erik Brandstrom. So, are you going to put Erik Brandstrom alongside Soucy, given that Brandstrom's not known for being great defensively and Soucy's been terrible?
That's not going to make the defense any better.
I don't know. At this point, I just want to see them trying something, though. Like, it is not working. It is not working. Try something different is just my simple, duh mentality to the Canucks problems right now.
And I mean, I guess that's fair, but like I said, I don't know what else you try. And I will say, I don't want to panic too much. Again, they're still a positive team. They're still at the top of the Pacific. I don't want them to try too many things because obviously it's been a rough last 3 games. Obviously losing to Edmonton 7-3, now giving up 5 goals to the Islanders. Don't want to see that. But before that, you beat the Kings 4-2. Obviously Anaheim and San Jose, not the best teams, but you go on a little bit of a win streak there. We had 4 wins in a row after that Florida game. So I think my biggest thing is consistency, and how do you find that consistency is the biggest question. I think it starts with coaching, and I think Tockett's a great coach. I think he'll whip them into shape, if you will, or whatever you want to call it. But I think it's finding that consistency, because when we've seen these line combinations work, and we've seen them work in big stretches or in stretches, and then we've seen them not work at all for stretches. So it's just about finding that consistency, I think, and then it's just about how they find that. I don't know how you find that. There's no scientific way to bring consistency to the team.
No, I think you're entirely right. Lock in the crease saying the Cybertruck of efforts, and I do think that that's a great way of saying it, because at no point was that effort in any way, shape, or form redeemable. Just like Cybertrucks. Darcy Higgs making a really, really good point in the chat. They miss Ian Cole. Now, Ian Cole was the whipping boy in the playoffs, largely because of being one of the most unlucky players I've ever seen in my entire life. He had multiple deflections go in off of him. When he was in the right position, they just happened to go in off of him. And yeah, I think Ian Cole brought something to this team that cannot be replaced. And that is what Liam was just saying. Consistency. Night in, night out, you knew what you were getting with Ian Cole. Was he a superstar defender that's going to light the lamp? No. But he was good enough all the time. He was just good enough. And that's what the Canucks don't have right now, especially in defensive depth, is good enough. Right now, Soucy, Myers, not good enough. Whether Ian Cole, he was good enough. Now, I will say, I would not have wanted to give Ian Cole the contract that he signed with Utah, which does kind of mean that he was never really going to stay here because he got a much better offer than I think the Canucks were willing to give him. But you're right, that the Canucks don't have that kind of player where you know what you're getting night in, night out, and he just provides the solid, reliable consistency as well as leadership as well. He brought a lot of veteran leadership, being a guy that's played, 1,000 games in the show. He has got cup pedigree. And I think that, underratedly, a huge loss for the Canucks was Ian Cole.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I will say this. I thought Soucy could be that guy to give you a little bit more consistently, especially defensively, but he just hasn't been that guy. We knew what Tyler Myers was. We know what Tyler Myers is at this point. But yeah, I think just considering on expectations, I think Soucy's the bigger disappointment, especially for that line.
Yeah, no, that's completely fair enough, especially because the Canucks kind of have treated him as a staple on that second pairing, and it's never really been questioned, and he's never really given reason to question it. And so, I mean, a lot of what you and I are talking about does genuinely just come down to consistency and finding their games again, but at what point do you start to worry? Because all we've heard all season long is, oh, don't worry, Canucks have been doing great, sure, 1 or 2 bad performances here, there's no reason to worry, but there are some players who are giving us cause for worry. Okay, Quinn Hughes didn't have a great game tonight. We're not worried about Quinn Hughes.
We're not worried.
But the likes of Soucy and Myers, they haven't been great at all this season. What point do you genuinely start to worry? But honestly, my big worry for the Canucks right now is how do you add another defenseman? There is so little on the market. Another good point by Darcy Higgs saying, I know Zadorov isn't playing great at the contract number. He's another miss. Yeah, great point. And I mean, that's the exact same as what I said with Ian Cole, where it's just like, yeah, I would not want him for that contract. It's a big overpayment. But you're right that in a void, the player would be a massive, massive miss for the Canucks. And I think that we just might have lost one too many players on the back end.
Yeah, and I would say this, like you said, the market's not very big right now, especially in terms of like bringing in a guy off of free agency or something. I can't even think off the top of my head. Now, I'm not exactly the most well-versed in who exactly is even on the free agent market right now, but I can't think of anybody who would be an immediate you want to bring in. I think what they would have to do is trade for someone. And the one thing the Canucks do have, obviously, again, not the best night tonight, but we've seen it this season, is depth. There's plenty of forwards on this Canucks team. Why carry so many forwards? Why not move one for an area that we clearly need someone?
No, absolutely. I mean, if you have a look at the list of defensemen whose contracts are expiring this year and who would actually be an upgrade in any way, shape, or form, it is bare bones. It is bare bones. That's why a lot of people are talking about Marcus Pettersson from the Pittsburgh Penguins. He's been pretty good in a second pairing role over in Pittsburgh. And of course, this regime has many ties to the Pittsburgh Penguins, and they are starting to seem like they're selling. Of course, Lars Eller dealt for a 3rd and a 5th.
I'll say I also like Marcus because playing on Pittsburgh, obviously they haven't had a very good season. So the fact that he still has really good numbers and the eye test is there as well is nice to see.
Yeah, numbers, analytics, eye test. He's actually been arguably their best defender, largely because Letang and especially Karlsson are having career worst years. Erik Karlsson.
I'll say Karlsson. Yes, I'll say this though. Karlsson hasn't been as bad as everybody's been saying, but we won't get into that.
I'm going to disagree, and I know you will.
I know you do.
Yeah, I love Erik Karlsson. He has been atrocious this year because the thing is the one thing he does is offense, and he's not providing it. And he's always been a bottom 10 defender in the league defensively, and he's really just the bottom 1 this year. So, so far this season, the Canucks have won the games they should, but they struggle against more competitive opponents. Sammy Bains, I think that's a great point.
You can't say it any better. That's perfect.
100%. I agree entirely. The Canucks have won the games that they should, but they're not winning the games that they could. And that's the issue right now for Vancouver. It's just that, You gotta come away with some of these, guys. Okay, you know what? You can have a bad loss against New Jersey, you can have a bad loss against New York, and you can have a bad loss against Edmonton. Not all three. Pick one or two. Have a bad game in one or two. But like the fact that it's just every time the Canucks go up against a playoff caliber opponent, it feels like they're the worst team is tough. And it's not like I'll use the other team that I root for as an example, the Ottawa Senators, who lost to an inferior opponent today.
Ugly goal.
In a different fashion. At the very least in that game, the Senators were the better team for all 60 minutes, and you just have a game where your goaltender isn't up to snuff. You let in a couple bad ones. Okay, it happens. Tonight, the Canucks were the worst team against a worse opponent, and it's a little worrying. But again, we've basically been parroting the same thing for 45 minutes now, so I will continue to try to look to the future after a tough performance tonight.
I think the future, like I said, I wouldn't change much. I'm not panicking so much where I'm like, oh my God, blow it up.
No.
Because we're still at the top of the Pacific. We're winning the games we should. I'll say this one's a bit of an outlier because we should win this one. But for the most part, we're winning the games we should. And I don't know what else you change. Like I said, there's not like there's defensemen in the AHL that you want to call up and they're going to make immediate impact. The forward lines you can shuffle the forward lines around, but they've been doing that. So that's something that's already been happening. And Demko's still out. So you're still running with Lankinen. Maybe you can run Seeloffs a little bit more, but it's not like he's exactly giving you the confidence or the numbers this year to make you want to start him more. So I don't know what you change if you're the Canucks. And I think that's actually the more concerning fact. Or for me, because there's not much to change and we're still not performing. So it's just kind of like ride it out until the team figures it out.
Yeah, no, I agree. It is a little bit tough of knowing exactly what they're going to need to do. And yeah, the defensive free agent market is just atrocious. Casey Run saying Alec Martinez might fit, maybe, but he is old now. He's, I believe, 37. And his contract's also pretty big. Now, granted, of course, because it is an expiring deal, Chicago could retain. So I've just checked. It's 37, I was right. And also $4 million contract. So even if Chicago retains, that's $2 million. Not terrible. Another player that would be kind of an Ian Cole archetype of
I was going to say, I think that's
player,
perfect.
lots of playoff experience. So honestly, not a bad shout. Alec Martinez could fit, especially if Chicago retains. But then it's one of those things where how much do you want to actually give up for a player like Alec Martinez, who's right now not playing great. Now, it is hard to really judge a defenseman playing on Chicago, probably the worst team in hockey right now. I guess aside from the Nashville Predators, but who knows what's happening over there.
Yeah, they've been rough too, yeah.
Yeah, who knows what's going on over there. So, but honestly, Martinez not a bad show, but I feel like the Canucks would be searching for someone who's going to be able to make a bit more of an impact than Alec Martinez. I think at this age and stage of his career, his ceiling's very low for what he can give to the Canucks, and I would be worried about his stamina and endurance over the length of a full playoff series, because of course that's what got Ian Cole in the end, is just not being able to keep up with that kind of energy and pace throughout that sort of games. For me, like, Marcus Pettersson is kind of the number one circle on my board. That or Rasmus Andersson, but of course Rasmus Andersson is going to cost an arm, a leg, your firstborn child.
But I think maybe even a guy like Mackenzie Weegar, because I think, like we mentioned,
again, 7-year deal though.
If you bring, yeah, that is a huge deal. But I'll say this: if you bring in a guy like Alec Martinez, you're basically saying we have to win this year or next year.
Yeah, well, I mean, on an expiring deal, you could always try to get him at like
you get him out there, but you try and get him to leave. But then, like you said, he's 37.
Yeah, no,
40-year-old.
No,
Alec
that's fair.
Martinez.
I just think that it's not super risky. Like the contract expires, you try again next year, kind of thing. But
no,
yeah,
that's fair.
We'll see.
I think I liked your point earlier that maybe someone who moves the needle a little bit more.
Yeah, no, 100%. It is kind of hard to find where you're gonna get that.
I like your Rasmus Andersson. I really like that one. We talked about that one last time, but I like.
Yeah,
Rasmus
the only issue
Andersson.
is just every contending team in the league would like Rasmus Andersson. I mean, he is the ideal trade target for quite literally anyone. He brings leadership. He can play on both sides. He's got a crazy good cap hit, and especially if Calgary ends up retaining. Seriously, I said that he's going to cost the equivalent of 2 firsts. I think by the time there's a bidding war at the trade deadline, it could be more than that. It could be the equivalent of like a first round pick caliber prospect, and then like 3 more items. I mean, we're talking what we gave up for Elias Lindholm. It wouldn't even get close to what we'd have to give up for Rasmus Andersson, especially because he's got another year left on his deal. So it does just kind of depend where the Canucks find themselves at the trade deadline, how serious they think they're going to be. I mean, it might be an uncomfortable conversation where, especially after last year, the Canucks really fancied themselves as a contender. But remember, we're only 1 year away from before that, missing the playoffs entirely. So it's do we think that we are a legitimate contender? Now, I'm not talking a playoff contender. I'm talking a Stanley Cup contender. If you think, oh, we could make a second, maybe even a conference final, that's not good enough. You don't go all in on thinking about a team like that. So I am interested to see where we get to at the trade deadline. I do think this team will be turned around. Another really big question mark, and we touched on it last show, but let's touch on it again, especially as I am joined by a guest who was a junior hockey goaltender himself, is what version of Thatcher Demko we are getting back, because that's going to be make or break. Last year, when the Canucks were, a good team, he was second in Vezina voting. Are we going to get a goaltender that is top 3 in Vezina voting when he comes back from an injury no NHL goaltender has ever had before?
So you don't want to say no, because obviously with a guy who has like the ceiling of Thatcher Demko, you don't really know. I think but what I've heard from the injury, and we talked, like you mentioned, we talked a little bit about it last time. I can't see how it's not at least going to be a little bit different. I forget what the name of the injury is, but it seems like yes, and there's only been like 2 guys ever who have had this injury in like all of sports. Yeah. So I can't see how he comes back and he's exactly the same, but I could be completely wrong. At the end of the day, these are still, NHL athletes. These are professional athletes. They know how to rehab. There's no reason that he's not getting the best possible rehab. It's just, I can't see how it's not going to affect him. And I think we heard from, I believe it was Elliot Friedman or something, that this could affect him the rest of his playing career. So I can't see how we're going to get the exact same Thatcher Demko, which is really scary because, again, something we talked about last time was how you might need an elite goalie to win a Stanley Cup. At least I think you do. You say you don't need one. I know we can go back and forth on that one, but it definitely helps. It definitely helps having that elite goalie. I don't want another playoff run where we're trying to get it done with Lankinen and Sheilofs.
Yeah. No, and
DeSmith, I guess in that case, DeSmith and Sheilofs.
Yeah, no, I think that in terms of whether or not you need an elite goalie to win the cup, if you look at the teams that won a cup in the last 20 years without an elite goaltender, if you look at how unbelievable those teams were on both forwards and defense, I mean, the most recent examples are Colorado and Vegas. Vegas won with Aiden Hill,
defensive cores in the league.
Yeah, exactly. And then and that's the thing. And then Colorado won with Kemper, who played not great in that whole playoff run. And that's exactly it. The best defensive cores of teams to win recently. I mean, not just Cale Makar and Devon Toews. They also had Byram and a bunch of other, defenders who could get things done in the playoffs. And then, I mean, Vegas's D-core, even right now, is just spectacular. And when they went on that run, it was, just as good. And Vancouver just quite frankly doesn't have that. If they added a defenseman that is as good as Rasmus Andersson, they might. But even then, I'm not willing to say confidently that they would. So I think that the Canucks are going to be a team that needs elite goaltending, or at the very least, very good goaltending.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree. I would make that point too. I think it's perfect that you brought it up, that those teams had the deepest defensive cores and possibly maybe even one of the deepest forward cores. Colorado now definitely doesn't look like they have a very good forward core, but at the time those were very, very deep teams, and we might have the forward core. Like I say all the time, the Canucks I think have a very deep forward core, but the defensive core is paper thin.
Yeah, no, it really is. So I think if you're good, we'll head on to the third period and take a look at the Canucks' kind of upcoming schedule, what we want to see for them in those games. So we shall head to the third now, and of course, third period is sponsored by our merch. If I can get that to work on my screen, yes, I can. I've never failed at this before. And lots of merch to choose from. Of course, all designed by us in-home here in Game Over Vancouver. What better way to support something you love than by rocking it as clothing? Game Over's apparel line is dropped with 3 unique designs. Whether you feel the nostalgic pull of our retro skater design, you want to make a statement with our established design, or do you want to wear your love for goalies proudly with our live and die by the goalie design, or you just need a coffee to get through the winter, we've got mugs as well. We've got you covered. Designed by Brady Chalice from Game Over Winnipeg. Use the QR code on stream right now at the bottom right-hand corner. Take a look through our apparel store and help us rebuild local sports media in Canada while repping your community. It continues to help us out We really appreciate it. So, yeah, that is our merch. I will bring Liam back in, and we'll take a look at the upcoming schedule here, as the Canucks have some easier games coming up. Of course, next game is, honestly, I will say it, the next 2 games are kind of must-wins. We are quite literally playing the worst team and the second worst team in the NHL right now, in the Chicago Blackhawks and then the Nashville Predators. Now, the Nashville Predators on paper should be really good, but the game of hockey never been played on paper, and it isn't now. So they are dead last in the league right now. God knows how, but they are. And the Blackhawks are second last, realistically. In my mind, they probably should be last. These are games that, if the Canucks lose, are going to be major, major red flags. Tonight was a big red flag, but if the Canucks bounce back, I don't think anyone will even remember this game. If the Canucks lose the next 2, even though the record will still be all right, people will be screaming and crying in the streets. And honestly, I'll be leading the charge.
And I wouldn't blame you. Like you said, Chicago, maybe not like you said a must win, but it's a game that we talked about it earlier, that Vancouver kind of this year has been one of those teams that they win the games that they should, and they've been kind of losing the games that they could, like you so eloquently put earlier. But I will say this, these are games that we should win, and if you start losing those, then there's more reason to panic. And it even goes past Nashville, I would say. Chicago, Nashville, obviously you think you should win those. The Rangers, I'd say, is a little bit of a toss-up, but they haven't actually been playing that great. They've been leaning on Shesterkin so incredibly hard that if he doesn't have a good game, that they're kind of hooped. But Ottawa, I think you'll attest, that's a game that Vancouver should win. And Boston has been abysmal this year. I think out of the next 5 games, they should go 4-1.
And then it's the Penguins after that. So, like, seriously, this is an opportunity. If the Canucks are not fraudulent, if they really are a team that is a serious contender and want to be taken seriously in the Western Conference, you're right. They should be winning at least 4 of the next 6. At least, if not more. I mean, the Blackhawks, that should be a done deal. Wipe them off the face of the earth. Predators, again, a better team on paper, but still, are you really going to give the 32nd place team in the league another win? You don't want to be that team. New York, I agree they haven't been playing well lately, but at the very least, they are a legitimate cup contender. Say what you will about Shesterkin having to carry games. The Canucks have an offensive performance like they did tonight. Shesterkin's not going to need to try very hard to get a shutout, because seriously, tonight was no offense whatsoever. The Senators, I actually think the Senators have been playing really good hockey lately. Some of their losses have just been brutal. I mean, tonight, Allmark had probably the worst performance he's had since coming to Ottawa. That game a couple weeks ago in the New York Rangers where they lost, I mean, they got heavily goalied by Shesterkin. So I do think the game against Ottawa will be a little bit harder than they think. But then again, the Bruins have been struggling, and that's a game that, you know how badly Vancouver wants to beat Boston every time that they come here. Canucks really should be putting their best foot forward.
They've been so bad. Like the Bruins, like obviously, like you said, they tend to bring their A game for us, and the Canucks tend to bring their A game for them. But they have been abysmal. And take this as someone who has a few Boston Bruins on his fantasy hockey team. They have been not a very good hockey team this year.
No, they haven't. And actually, really quickly before we go back to the schedule, I will make one more point about tonight's game, because nothing is perfect, with a really good point that the most terrifying thing about tonight's game is that Brandstrom and Desharnais may have been the best defensive pair tonight. Hughes got walked and Hronek controller disconnected, and we already have talked for 10 minutes about how bad Susie Myers was. And I mean, Desharnais, put it this way, no. Desharnais played the same he's been playing all season. If people have been calling him to be out of the lineup. And I agree with that comment about him being probably the best defenseman, or one of the best defensemen the Canucks had tonight. And he's been playing bad. Like, tonight was just a game to forget for the defense.
Yeah, he had a fight, obviously, in this game, which you love to see. But I'll say this. Got really lucky that he didn't get a penalty on that fight, because he didn't have his tie down done. So that could have been really bad for him. But yeah, I think that's a good point, that it's extremely scary that by far, on paper, your worst defensive pair was quite possibly your best. And I would say a lot of people would say was the best for sure. As Brandstrom, I thought, did a pretty good job too. He didn't necessarily, like I said, everyone kind of had a bad game, but in terms of where your expectations were, he was kind of pretty close. He didn't have a good game, but it wasn't like egregious or anything like that.
Yeah, no, 100%. But I mean, yeah, if you're looking at these next upcoming games, Blackhawks and Predators, you got to win. Rangers and Ottawa, at the very, very least with those games. Those are two teams that are very much in the playoff hunt. So you have to put up a good performance against them. I'm not saying you have to beat them, because again, you just can't win every game in hockey. But I am saying you need to be able to put up a good performance, especially as both the Rangers and Ottawa have been struggling. You can't be the ones to end their struggles, especially on, back-to-back games. Then the Bruins, Penguins, Sabres, and Red Wings. all teams that have been struggling. I mean, the next like major threat that they're playing, I mean, the Lightning on December 8th. Look at how far ahead in the schedule we're getting before it's a legitimate threat. Maybe the Wild have been on quite the tear, so maybe you could call them December 3rd. But I mean, for the rest of November, every single game is against a team that the Canucks on paper should at the very least be tied or better than. And so this should be a huge run for the team. And it really hasn't been thus far. I mean, got trounced by the Oilers, I mean, I guess beat the Ducks and Kings in games gone past kind of thing. But I think this is going to be a make or break month for Vancouver, because if they do not put up good performances against these subpar teams, it's going to really not be a good omen for the rest of the year, and it'll really shake down the record too.
Yeah, and I think you made a really good point that these are games that they aren't necessarily must-wins because it's still early, but in terms of being a real playoff team, these are games that you want to see your team win to be taken seriously.
Absolutely. And so thank you for updating that on us on that. Nothing is perfect, because Liam, as we were watching the game, the moment that happened, he said that should have been a penalty. I don't know why it wasn't a penalty, and now we know why it wasn't a penalty.
They're ripped because, of course, those jerseys. Yeah,
because the Fanatics jerseys are so bad it ripped.
I was gonna say, yeah, there's so much good quality with those Fanatics jerseys.
Did you see that Jeff Petrie of the Red Wings was actually wearing an Adidas jersey the other night?
Oh no.
Yeah, so the Red Wings might get fined for that, but he was actually caught wearing an Adidas jersey in game, which is quite hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, my opinions on the Fanatic jerseys. I mean,
yeah, I mean, I will say they have, considering how bad Fanatic's reputation has been in hockey the past, always. This year they have not actually been that bad. We have not seen many major malfunctions from Fanatic's jerseys, but I guess tonight counts. So, yeah, there you go. Chalk that up and add that one to the pile.
It does count. I will say I definitely think of it Fanatics more of like when you order the jerseys and you get an egregious mistake. Those are bad. But yeah, I'm not surprised to see an Adidas jersey. That's for sure.
So we'll keep talking about the Canucks for a little bit here, but for anyone that is still watching, firstly, thank you very much for joining us. And secondly, if you have any questions in the fourth period, which we'll get to in a moment here, we will be answering all of the viewers' questions. If you guys have any questions, please do put them in the chat, and Liam and myself will answer them to the best of our ability. Go back to CCM, says Darcy. I'd love it.
I think those ones are CCM behind me there. There you go.
They definitely are.
There you go. You got an Oland and then the Marner. I'm not sure what the Marner one is. Oh, it's Adidas.
It's Adidas. Honestly, I didn't mind Adidas, but I gotta agree with Darcy that CCM, at least of when I've been alive, CCM was kind of peak. They did a really. I will
admit they're a little bit itchy, but yeah, other than that, I don't mind them.
Yeah, well, we don't have to wear them, so that's fine.
Yeah, I think they look nice just like that. I try not to wear them too much. I actually have a Kelsey jersey and this is the reason I don't wear them, is I had a Kelsey jersey that I got a bunch of stuff all over and it can never be fixed, and I was really sad about that.
Yeah, my jersey that I wear is I got an Adidas jersey when I found out that the Canucks were the league was switching to Fanatics. I was like, okay, I gotta snag one. Gotta
cash in.
Yeah. And then we've got this fake jersey behind me. I think it's fake. I'm actually not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure this one's fake. And then my great CCM BMO jersey, which definitely doesn't fit me as it's a kid. Kid size Brendan Morrison. That was my first hockey jersey, and I love it hanging off the electrical panel in my room. High budget here at Game Over Vancouver. I've really renovated my bedroom to be the best background that I possibly can.
And I'll answer the question because I've seen it a couple times. The person on the other Canucks jersey, I'm gonna never be allowed back on this show, but it is Mark Messier on the back.
Get out of my broadcast. Leave.
That is who is on the back of the other one. That's why you never see the back of it. So yeah,
that's a good call, and we better never see the back of it. Maybe we'll place a bet halfay through the season, and I'll make you wear it.
If I lose a bet, I have to wear it or I have to show it for the show. Yeah,
we'll do that. All right, cool. Well, honestly, at this point, I'm kind of feeling ready to wrap things up. Let me know if you have any extra points you want to make about the game, but I think that we've said all there is to be. Honestly, I feel like we've said all there is to be said about 100 times at this point, because seriously, the entire game can be summed up with everyone played bad. Good night.
Yeah, no, pretty much. I'm trying to go through my notes. It was like you said, just kind of a sloppy game from the Canucks all around the board, and New York maybe didn't play the best hockey, but they played pretty good hockey, getting, I believe it was like 32 shots on goal, which is better than their average of 30. They thought they did a really good job getting to the front of the net and just creating a lot of traffic in front for Lankinen to have to deal with, which is a good way to score goals when you don't give up a lot of shots or when you don't take a lot of shots, even though they did take a decent amount of shots today. But yeah, I think you can summarize it with Canucks didn't play good at all by any facet of the game, and the Islanders played all right, and it made them look even better than they probably should.
Yeah, no kidding. So, well, we'll head to the fourth now. I don't actually think we have any questions, so we might just be able to end it right here. But yeah, one final time, Canucks lose 5-2 to the Islanders in a pretty atrocious fashion. Next game, as we mentioned, is against the Chicago Blackhawks. That will be this Saturday in 2 days' time. Puck drop 7 p.m. PST. And of course, join us right here on the Game Over Vancouver channel right after that game ends for another fantastic show. That one will be both Mark and Kaja, so you'll be treated to a wonderful duo of the other two hosts here on the Game Over Vancouver channel. Tonight's show, of course, myself, Zach Clarke. You can find my socials down below. Zach Clarke PXP for everything except Blue Sky, which I'm now on, as everyone seems to be now. Zach Clarke Media for that one, because I made that account ages ago. And I'd like to thank my guest, Liam Higgs, for joining. Thank you so much. You can catch him at Higgs Sports on, I believe that's your handle for the important things.
For everything, yeah.
For all the important things.
I don't have Blue Sky yet, so.
You gotta get on that as Twitter continues to tumble further and further. Blue Sky kind of taking advantage in the way that Threads could not, as it's kind of bad. So
yeah, it's trying. I think there's something trying to kill Twitter like every other year since Elon took over. So we'll see if this one's finally successful.
Yeah, we'll see. But it definitely seems to have a better start than any of the other ones had. So how bad will Bedard light up the Canucks on Saturday? Honestly, I think there's no way he doesn't score. I'll say that I just don't see how he won't
at least
score.
Get the point, right?
Yeah, it's his first game in Rogers. He had a really funny quote about the fact that tonight, on that night, he's paying to play because he had to buy so many tickets for friends and family. First game in Rogers Arena, childhood dream come true for Connor Bedard. I can't see how he won't score, aside from the fact that he's one of, if not the most talented young forward in the league. So I think he will light up the Canucks.
Matvei Michkov might be up there too. Obviously, he beat your Ottawa Senators today.
Yeah, and that's a player that I will say I have been right about since day one. Even when he was in the draft with Bedard, I said Michkov would be at least the second best player to come out of that draft, if not tie with Bedard. I knew from day one he'd be special. I'm very rarely right about prospects.
I know you're right. You were right. You're right. Even though I did say that I did agree with you that.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what? He was one of those ones where like it was kind of hard to miss. I'll say that. But you were right.
Well, hey, slid down the leaderboard. The draft leaderboard. But anyways, yeah, I do think Bedard will light up on Rogers. That being said, I do think that he'll get a point or two, and in a 7 or 8-2 Canucks win. I mean, especially after the performance tonight. I don't think the Canucks can be satisfied with a win on Saturday. They need to go out there and hammer them, punch them, destroy them. This is a team that you are, on paper, so infinitely better than. This is a team in the thick of a rebuild, in the heart of a rebuild, that is still competing for a top 5 draft pick. You can't go out there and squeak out a 3-2 victory. You need to crush them, especially considering how bad the Canucks have been on home ice. This is a chance to turn around that home record a little bit and right the wrongs that have been in Rogers Arena all season long.
No, and I would completely agree. It's definitely one of those like kind of fix me games for Vancouver when it comes to Chicago. They can get everything on track. I saw it on in the comments just a second ago, but I think it's one of those ones that you've kind of put in the back of your mind. You kind of try and forget about, and you keep on going because I think it was just that bad that. I don't think they watch film because it just was a little bit of an outlier. Like you don't watch the film of this game because everything just went wrong. You kind of just try and forget about it and keep on moving. And I think Chicago is kind of the perfect matchup for Vancouver, who I believe have lost 2 in a row now, and they haven't had a great start to November. They've been a little bit of a streaky team so far this season, but hasn't been a great November. And I think it's a great like fix me game to get them back into the swing of things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is entirely true. And so we will see how they do. Yeah, one more time. Next Canucks game is going to be this Saturday, 7 p.m. And join Kaja and Mark Sianquita after the game right here on Game Over Vancouver. An electrically entertaining duo they are. So they'll have you covered after the puck has been, well, I was going to say puck's been dropped. After the puck's been put away, after the game is done, they shall take you over. So for now, we shall bid you adieu. I've been Zach Clarke. He's been Liam Higgs. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. To all of you who have liked, subscribed, everything. It all helps. Thank you so much for supporting, local bootstrap media here in Vancouver. We really genuinely do appreciate it. Not just saying that. And thank you to my guest, Liam Higgs. We'll definitely see him again on the Game Over Network as the year goes on. So thank you all so much for watching, and we hope you have a great night.